Kalimera, Kalispera, whatever time you are watching this is Mappa. It's a very special edition, very, very special edition, because this is a gentleman I've been hoping to get on the podcast for quite a while because I'm intrigued by his project. I'm intrigued by what he's doing, especially when it comes to Cypriot football. I think he's making a massive wave in Cypriot football and it's going a little bit under the radar for those that don't really pay too much attention. But those who do, now that Sophocles knows, JSA Scholarships. What are you doing, bro? Segala.
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
No, great to have you on, man. Great to have you on. And thank you for your time. I know you're a busy guy going back and forth from the United States. Am I correct?
Yep, flying there on Tuesday.
Those air miles are doing well then, yeah?
Well, it's part of the job, you know?
Of course. Of course. Well, bro, I mentioned your organization, JSA Scholarships. The obvious question is, what is it all about? I've checked the website, but as I told you before we started recording, I've come into this one completely alien to this because I want to delve into this because it's something that I am highly interested in terms of whether it be youth development or being someone that works for an agency myself. I'm interested to see how other people operate. This isn't a spy mission, I promise.
Yeah.
But it's just something that I'm intrigued about. And obviously, you and I have spoken about briefly the Cypriot national team very briefly and the development of younger players. And I'm sure there are going to be many coaches in Cyprus who have a vested interest in youth development and need to know what you guys are doing. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure a lot of these players have spoken to their coaches or their mentors, etc., and they have a clear vision as to what you guys are doing. But I think the potential for the development of our players is very, very important. And people such as yourself are doing what you can to help with that.
Yeah. Well, just to, basics first. I mean, JSA Scholarships, essentially, what we do is help athletes, mainly footballers, but other sports as well, get scholarships in the US. So in America, it's very different to Europe. The concept of an academy, for example, let's say the Los Angeles Lakers, there's no, LA Lakers under 17s, under 15s, and then you get to the first team. It goes high school, university, professional. So it's the same for football or soccer, as they call it. Academies for professional clubs in US soccer is something very new. Traditionally, the route has always been high school, university, and then there's a draft like in other American sports. And yeah, I mean, I started doing this more of as a hobby whilst I was still in university, helping friends get scholarships. And then after I finished university, basically this is what I've been doing. So far, I mean, from Cyprus, it's been over probably close to 40 footballers who've done this in the last 7-8 years. And we've also expanded. I mean, we've had players from other markets as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a great path. It allows you to keep your education going, get a degree, but also if you are good enough, then in fact it opens more doors than playing in Cyprus, for example, because you'll see guys like Jack Harrison at Everton. He was at university. Matt Turner, who went from Arsenal to Forest this summer, he was at university. So there's even Leicester City last January, they signed a player straight from university. So it allows you to continue doing, both your studies and your sport, whether it's football or anything else, at a very high level.
This is something that blows my mind because speaking to obviously Thasso and other people that know about Cypriot football, I've always said to them, these lads that go to the United States, they're going to play college soccer because it's a high level. I think people have this misconception about US soccer. I mean, I know about MLS, I know about USL and the NCAA and all these other leagues. And obviously there's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of pressure on youngsters to perform in the United States? Because they're all highly competitive, but then there's that developmental side of things. So I've always believed that these youngsters that go to the United States, they have a bigger opportunity to find the right pathway to a bigger club than if they were just staying in Cyprus. Now, this isn't a disrespect to the Cypriot League or the Cypriot clubs, but it just appears that players such as maybe Andreas Sava that left Omonia to go to the United States, he'll have a better chance of getting a move to a USL or an MLS club playing in the States at college level than he would in Cyprus.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, the path for most Cypriot players, okay, you've got your Loizu or Yannis Achat. You're going to have some exceptions, but the vast majority of youngsters in Cyprus, the path is going to the second tier, getting, the reality is the first year in the second division, they are not really going to play if they are going to a team that's above mid-table. So you start off at the lower end second division teams, and then you build it up, and then maybe after 2-3 years, you get to go to a top division club. And guys have done it. I mean, and there's a lot of guys that have done that. Dimitris Theodorou, Minas Antoniou, and hats off to them. But the reality is, our second division, you lack the facilities, you lack the conditions compared to what you have in the States. Because in the US, you have the best facilities in the world, like literally better than the Premier League, better than 95% of clubs in Europe, and they're as good as anything you're going to find. Like the best university facilities are as good as anything you're going to find at Arsenal, at Chelsea, at Barcelona, and so on. So you have access to elite facilities. You have the support staff, nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, sports psychologists. All that is available to you. Whereas in Cyprus, it's up to the player to seek that, to pay for that, and so forth. And the other thing is you get to play a lot of games. Whereas in Cyprus, I mean, even in the second division, if you look at guys under the age of 21, they're not really playing. If there are teams that have high targets, they are not playing. Like this year, Krasava, David Jamas, not really playing. Okay, it's early and I'm sure he'll make it, but it's not easy to get minutes at clubs of a certain level. Also because of the reality in Cyprus, we don't have the patience. Coaches have to face a lot of job insecurity. So, is the US and the college system better than being in a professional academy, in England, in Italy, in Spain? Of course not. But is it better than the path that Cypriot players had to previously go through? Yes, 100%.
So what's the youngest age you've taken over to the United States?
2005. So this would be boys that go straight out of high school at
Right.
17 and a half, 18 years old. This year there's two boys, Stavros Karalambous and Yorgos Kondilis, and they're both doing incredibly well. Because there's another misconception. People think that college soccer is going to be 18, 19, 20-year-olds playing. The average age is 23. There's players 27, 28 years old playing. So for Stavros and Yorgos to be playing so many games at 18 years old, every professional club in the US has them, under the radar right now.
That's a really interesting point you've made there, because I know there are a lot of footballers right now who are perhaps looking for clubs at the moment that are, say, 24, 25, and they can't find the club, but they're also looking to get into education. So effectively, they can come to you and say, look, I want to study in the United States, but I also want to play football. Can you help me out?
There's no age limit. There is, however, a limit to how many gap years you can have outside of education, but there are ways around it. That's the reality. So that's why you have a lot of players, maybe they're 22, 23, and they're freshmen in university. By the time they graduate, they're 27, 28 years old. So even though it's not so common, it has increasingly, the average age of a collegiate soccer player, it keeps going up and up because, there's loopholes to going around that.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I'll tell you what, this leads me on to my next question when it comes to the culture, Cypriot culture. And as you know, I mean, look, I don't know what it's like in Cyprus nowadays, but in the UK, a lot of youngsters that want to be footballers, their parents say to them, don't be stupid. Misabellos. It's not going to happen for you. Study, get your grades, yada, 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 etc., etc. Leave football as a hobby. And I'm assuming, but I could be wrong, I'm assuming that the mentality is very similar in Cyprus as well. Go study, get your grades and that kind of stuff. So effectively what you guys are doing, or what you're doing, is you're catering to the pressure from the parents, i.e. they're going to get their education, but they can also play football at a good level and a developmental level.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is for the vast majority of footballers in Cyprus, this is the most they can get out of their talent. Because the average Cypriot player, his salary, I mean, the average Cypriot player essentially is someone who plays at the teams that get relegated or the teams that try to push for promotion. And players at that level, they make anything between 15,000 euro to 35,000 per year. So, the reality, that's not enough to have a retire on that. Like you're gonna need a job after football, you're gonna need a degree. So the maximum value they can get out of their talent, because they do make a lot of sacrifices to get to that level, is to go to the States, get an education and so on. And a lot of them understand it. I mean, I can tell you it's a lot easier to convince players as well beyond the parents than what it was when I started, because you do have a track record, you do have case studies, and also, I mean, it's been gradual, but players are better informed and they know what to expect in Cyprus. So if they're serious about playing professionally, for example, Stavros, Yorgos, you leave straight after high school, you have still a lot of room for improvement, and it's up to them to make it. But to your point, I mean, yeah, of course, the parents want to get an education and so on. The reality is that college soccer, in order to be good enough to play, first of all, you have to be a good player. The academic part comes second. That's the reality. If we're talking about playing at the highest level, Division One college soccer on a big athletic scholarship, it's about being a good player. It has nothing to do with your grades. Now, if you're a good student, like someone like Sava, of course, you're going to get into a top university. If you're a mediocre student, you're going to go to a lower level university. But in terms of the soccer, you have to be a high level player. And unfortunately, Cyprus doesn't produce a lot of players of that level.
It is a shame, and the two examples I can think of off the top of my head, who I believe went to the United States with your assistance, was Costantino Christou, that was at Omonia. I think it was at Mappa last season, and Andrea Vangelou, also from Omonia's academy. That Christou, I haven't spoken to these guys face to face, but obviously on Instagram we speak to each other, we follow each other, and Costantino, I think his brother also plays for Omonia, if I'm not mistaken. For Map, is that Map on loan now? Is he there permanently?
Yeah. He's at Map on loan, yeah.
He's on loan, yeah. So look, I'll give you Costantino for example, right? How easy is it for him to get his move to the United States if he has a contract with his club? And this just goes not just for him, but for any other player, because you do have a lot of them that sign. You see the announcement, they've signed the new contract till 2027, and then 3 months later, they're on the plane to the United States. How does that work?
Look, the reality is the vast majority of contracts nowadays, like a first professional contract in Cyprus, it can be anything from as little as €50 per month to like the best paid players nowadays, like first contract, maybe it's going to be €700. So, okay. A club is not going to prevent you from getting a free education because you sign a contract for 300, 400, €200 when you were, 18 years old. At the same time, what I always tell the players, if the club really does want you and they want to keep you, well, tell them, give me a proper contract. Because if they want you to be there and you're 20, 21, 22 years old and you're making €400, €500, they're not serious about really counting you on you and being a part of their future, and so forth. So it's never really been a problem, terminating that contract. Some clubs, they'll want some reassurances that you will go study and you're not going to sign, for our rivals the next day and so forth, and that's understandable. But I think, that to be honest, like off the record, a lot of the people in power, whether it be head coaches, technical directors at the clubs in Cyprus, they would tell me, if it was my son, I wouldn't want him to stay here, So it's never been an issue. And the reality is the vast majority of boys that do go to the States, they will be players who sign professional contracts before going, not because you have to, but just because, if you're good enough to go to the US, chances are you were a professional player before leaving Cyprus.
So effectively, all these players that have gone to the United States, their contracts have been terminated, or have they been put on hold? They've been terminated. That's interesting, and this leads me on to my next question, because let's say, for example, someone like, I don't know, again, listen, I'm using Constantino as an example because he's the first name that comes in. But let's say, for example, someone like Toronto sign him, and he goes to Canada, plays MLS, and the next thing you know, he's playing for, I don't know, PSV Eindhoven. I'm just being random here. And then, and you've got the financial transactions. At what point can Omonia turn around and say, well, hang about, we broke this contract for you so that you can go abroad or the United States to get your education? Isn't there, I mean, look, I don't know the legal side of things. Obviously, you do from that perspective, but do they have any kind of right to say, well, you are with us, we gave you that freedom to go, now we're owed something because of the financial transaction between PSV and Toronto, for example?
Well, what applies is what applies in general to all players. So the club that developed you is entitled to 5% of any future transfer fee. It's the solidarity fee. So if any player were to sign and then, signs in the MLS, then the MLS sells him on to another club, then the club in Cyprus would always be entitled to 5%, in the same way that, when Apoel Sophocles Olympiacos was entitled to, I think it was 4% was to Olympiacos and 1% was to Ethnikos Lachon, because that's where Pierrot was when he was 12 or 13. So the clubs will always be entitled to that money. Now, in terms of a transfer fee, there's no transfer fee because you're a free agent. And that's why college players are so attractive to clubs, both the MLS and Europe, because you can sign a player at 21, 22, 23. So they're young, but they're not too young. They're ready to actually get in the first team and play. And they're free agents. So that's why you have, beyond going to the MLS after university, there's guys that sign directly in the Premier League. Jacob Montes at Crystal Palace, Opoku at Leicester City. You have guys like Franzi Pierrot, who signed straight Belgian top division. Joe Bell signed in Norway. You had Camara sign in Bundesliga. Like, it's a great market, and more clubs, with the success of guys like Jack Harrison, Tim Ream, all these guys, clubs now in Europe know that there's an untapped market out in college where they can sign guys who are ready to make, an impact. But the clubs in Cyprus, they'll always be entitled to their 5%. From there on, they're not entitled to anything anyway, and I think it's fair. At the end of the day, they let the players go. So once you terminate someone's contract, you shouldn't be entitled to anything further.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's a question that might be a little bit of a tricky one. So I don't blame you if you don't want to answer this, but from a financial perspective, look, I've got a few friends that coach in the United States, and we're talking, these academies. So he doesn't coach. Well, one or two of them, they don't coach in university, but they coach academies, and they tell me that it's so bloody expensive for kids to be in academies because they need to pay for their own kits, etc. Now, obviously, you've got student fees in the United States and accommodation fees. So I'm assuming they stay within the halls of residence, right? How can these lads afford them? Is this a case of the parents have money, or is it they take a loan, or is it I don't know how it works. So this is the personal question. I guess maybe I should be asking this, but
no. I mean, so okay, as far as youth football in the States, it is very expensive because you pay to play. However, the MLS academies are like any other academy in Europe. You don't pay for anything. Everything's covered by the club, your school, your housing, and so on. Now, in terms of how it works with college, with university, each university is allowed 10 scholarships, 10 athletic scholarships, which they can distribute any way they want. So you could have a full scholarship, you could have 20 guys on 50%, but when you add all of them up at any given time, it's a maximum of 10. And the reason is so that it's balanced. It's essentially, it's like a salary cap, which they have in other sports. So it's a maximum of 10 athletic scholarships, football scholarships. There are ways, though. For example, let's say Konstantinos Christou, cause because he had good grades in high school, he also gets an academic scholarship. So cause is on a full scholarship, everything's covered for it. A full scholarship covers tuition, accommodation, meals, insurance, all of his equipment. They're sponsored by Nike, plus pocket money on top of the scholarship. But for cause, for example, it's like 80% athletic scholarship, 20% academic. So he was an even more attractive player for the coaches there, because not all of the money would have to come out of their budget. Now, to get that type of scholarship, where like Andreas Evangelou, Andreas is on a full scholarship as well, Andreas costs 10% of the team's budget. So they want someone who's going to come in and be a key player from day one.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Brilliant. Now, onto an easier question to answer. What about the cultural difference? Because they're going from Cyprus to the big US of A. Now, look, I'm sure they've been away on holiday before to other countries, but the States, as you know, massive. How have they been able to settle, especially if they don't have other Cypriots around them?
Look, it is very different. What I would say, the good thing in terms of adapting is that Americans are very warm and welcoming people. So it's much easier than, Western Europe in terms of, people welcoming you there. Now, the biggest differences culturally in terms of the football culture, the US is quite British in how they like their football, how they interpret it. It's high intensity, very hard working on the pitch, off the pitch, which we don't really have, as as Cypriots. But the most important thing in terms of adapting is just realizing you are the foreigner. The Americans are not going to change for you. You are the one that has to change. They work a lot harder than us. That's the reality. So and especially with the scholarships that a lot of the boys from Cyprus get, where they are the most expensive paid player on the team, you have to work hard. It's not just about being a good player. Now, other differences in terms of the football part specifically, the rules in college soccer are a bit different. So the clock starts at 90 and it runs down. When the ball goes out, the clock stops. So it's similar to basketball. In Cyprus, especially U19s and second division, I don't think we play more than 55, 50 minutes of football. Whereas there, the clock stops, so it's 90 minutes of football. And the other big difference is you're allowed to sub a player in, sub him out, and then sub him in again. So it's a bit, again, like futsal. So the tempo, it doesn't drop. So that takes getting used to. It takes getting used to also that it's a bit like hockey or basketball where there's rotations. So you're going to play 10, 12 minutes, and the boys are like, well, why did he take me off after 10 minutes? What did he expect me to do in 10 minutes? Whereas, no, it's a 10-minute shift. You're meant to go in, do your best for 10 minutes, rest the other guy so he can be brought back on, which, in basketball, you have that. In hockey, you have that. But in football, obviously, that doesn't exist. So it takes getting used to, and also it's very hard on defenders, especially because those guys never get subbed out, but they're always going up against someone who's fresh. So I think that the clock, so you play more, and also just the style is more English style. The referees also more English style, so it's not like Cyprus where you get a lot of protection from the referees. That you do need to get used to. Living in the US, I think that's the easy part. They're very, very welcoming, and also with the amount of money they invest in a player, they want to make sure that he's okay. So they'll help you, with that transition to being a university student, to being away from your family, and so on. The coaches that do their job well, they'll take care of that as well.
Well, it's effectively an investment, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, like there's boys, someone like Marcos Kitromilidis, his scholarship was 85,000 a year for 4 years. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, good luck to him. Good luck to him. Okay, so the next subject, I guess we have to touch on the Cypriot national team. Now, these guys have gone to the United States either to play football or to get education, or both. Now, do you think a lot of them have ambitions to play club football at the highest level and also play for the national team?
Definitely. And I mean, this year, I believe you have Hajimitsis, Christou, Evangelou, Sava, Pandelis Gavril. So there's at least 5 players who were, called up to the under-21 national team in June, which was Serios Feneridis, so 6. 6 players who were called up to the under-21 national team in June, right before they went to the States. So you have 6 guys active with the under-21 national team. You've got 2 guys active with the under-19, Yorgos Kondilis, Stavros Paralambous, who were the starting duo in midfield. I mean, of course, they want to keep being part of the national team setup at youth level and go on to play for the men's national team. The reality is previously, when guys went, even though they were active in the national team, once they went to the States, they were frozen out. This year, there were attempts to bring players in. However, logistically, it was difficult just because of the timing. So all these guys were freshmen, and there was I think the first call up of the under-21 national team was first week of September, which was, first week of classes, second week of the season in the States. It really was bad timing for guys to leave right off when they go. But in the spring, for example, there's no reason why not calling them up, especially when these guys are playing regularly. They're playing at a much higher level than under 19s in Cyprus, second division in Cyprus, which, most of the guys in the national team, that's the level they're playing at. But, that's up to the federation,
Have they ever mentioned any concerns about their international future by going to the United States? Because, bro, look, I'll be honest with you, and maybe I'm way off base here, but it just seems that unless you're an exceptional talent, if you're not based in Cyprus, you've got no chance of making the under-21s, and you've got no chance of making the national team.
Yeah, they do express concerns. At the same time, once they're there and they see what the US has to offer, and also, like, for example, Christou, yesterday he was playing the number one team in the States. He scored the last goal of the game. 4,000 people, 20 scouts in the stadium. Yeah, he could have been in Cyprus and lose 9-0 to France. So, I think players realize what's best for them once they're there. Now, of course, they want to play for the national team. It's a huge honor, but the way it is now, our national team setup isn't what it should be. So, okay, I don't consider it, a missed opportunity, missing this national team games. As bad as that sounds, a lot of things need to change in the whole structure,
Oh, absolutely. And look, I'm sure you're probably fed up with me talking about the amount of British-based players we have out here that can play for the national team. I was speaking to one the other day. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's doing very, very well at the club that he's at, professional, at a very good level. I think you guess who he is. But again, it just goes back to the old adage where I don't know whether it's just politics or whether it's just, or maybe it's, okay, I'm using the word alleged here, alleged corruption. I don't know what it is, but it just seems to me with what you're doing, you're actually assisting the development of these players, whether it be intentionally or unintentionally. You're still doing it by giving them the opportunity to go to, as you quite rightly said, a bigger nation, more resources, better training from every element, from the technical to the tactical to the physical, everything. So you're giving them that opportunity by creating this organization of yours and helping them get their education as well, obviously. But you mentioned our boy playing in front of 4,000 people. You wouldn't have got 4,000 people in most of the Barathlon games. Let's get it right.
No, and again, obviously, if Kos was playing for Omonia the same way Karalambos is, fantastic for his development. But for most of these players, the reality is it's the second division, and it's doing what, Pavlidis was doing at Doxa last year, just, being a quota, just so you don't, pay the fine, or, playing at these low-level top division clubs, which it doesn't really get you somewhere. It's not an environment conducive to developing as a player. So I'm not saying, the US is, the greatest place for football development, but it's a lot better than what we have. I do think, Greece called players to their under-21 national team that were playing in the US, Iceland, Haiti, like Costa Rica. And I mean, you say, well, what about Costa Rica? Well, Costa Rica gets to the World Cup. They're far better than us. So,
And they're higher up in the FIFA rankings
yeah,
as well.
and they play in the World Cup. Like, you could play from Costa Rica playing in the biggest leagues in the world. We don't. So if these countries, even the U.S. men's national team, a few years back, Jordan Morris, he was a student at Stanford, and he was starting for the men's national team over Josie Altidore. And Josie Altidore was at Sunderland, at his peak. So all these countries are calling up players to their under 21, to their men's national teams, whilst they're still in university. I think Cyprus could do it as well, But again, like you say about the British players, it shouldn't be about familiarity. Do your homework, see how they're doing in the US, because there's also boys who went to the US and they're doing far better than other guys who had, more established reputation in Cyprus and so forth, because players develop at different rates and so forth. So, I mean, there's players that were late bloomers or so on that are doing extremely well in the US that were never considered, whereas other guys who maybe, don't even get playing regular time, they are considered because there's already a degree of familiarity because they're already part of the national team system.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Well, there's another question that just hit me, which I wanted to ask at the beginning, but that was the national service, because obviously that's another thing. Because I've spoken to a few coaches in Cyprus, and they're like, still, these youngsters, they train with the club, they study at college, then they got to go in to do the national service a couple of days a week, and then it's just very, very difficult. So how do you guys bypass that? I mean, obviously I know they're going away, so is it the fact that if they ever go back to Cyprus to live, they have to do their service again?
Yeah, no. I mean, the vast majority of boys who are in the States, they'll do their service, and once they do it, they'll go. Or they'll do their military service, start university in Cyprus, and then maybe 20, 21 years old, they'll go to the US. Now, there is a provision in the law that states, if you do have a scholarship and it's an athletic scholarship, because academic scholarship, you'll have your grades next year, you can always go after the army. But an athletic scholarship, you might get injured, the team might not leave that specific position, so it's there's a certain deadline for an athletic scholarship. If it's a scholarship of a significant size, you're allowed to postpone your service for the duration of your studies. And then once you finish your studies, then you'll have to come and do your service.
Okay, brilliant. And also, if there was someone that wanted to do a scholarship and came to you and said, how do I do this? Is there a set of rules or I don't know permutations that they have to follow in terms? I mean, I'm not talking about their criminal record or anything because they're going to get into the United States. But are there any steps that they need to follow to be able to qualify to get a scholarship?
So as far as the academics are concerned, the universities in the States will look at your final 4 years of secondary education. So for someone going to a public school in Cyprus, that would be Triti Gymnasiou, Proti Deftera Triti Lygiou. So, the better your grades, the better options you'll have in terms of level of school academically, and also perhaps you can get an academic scholarship. Now, as far as the football is concerned, the reality is, players don't work hard enough in Cyprus, and they don't start working hard early enough. So physically, we lack a lot. Like you'll see, Cypriot players at 18, 19 years old, and they're still boys, and that's why they go to the first team and they can compete. So they have to work, so that 18 years old, you have to be ready to compete against men, because US college soccer, it's men's football. It's far more intense than Cyprus because of how they play, culturally and so forth. And for me, what I tell people is, if you're talking about Division 1 high scholarship, you have to be able to play at second division level in Cyprus and do well. And that might sound easy to people who are not familiar with the second division, but it's not. For example, last year, if we are looking at 2004 borns, so boys who were in the army, I think the only two that played regularly was Sergios Fenoridis at Mappa and Stelios Vrondis at Box. Two guys. So yeah, it's not easy, and it's not because clubs don't give opportunity. It's not because there's so many foreign players, because those things don't apply in the second division. It's because players are not ready. And okay, you can blame the academy, you can blame the system, but at the end of the day, it's up to the player to work more, to do more, because the academies are what they are, the system is what it is. It's not going to change, and we've been seeing this, for generations and generations of players. So I tell guys, you have to be proactive. You have to work a lot harder than what you are doing right now, so that 18, 19 years old, you can go to the second division and compete against that level of player, because that's what you are going to get in the States.
Well, do you know, it's interesting you bring that up, because obviously we've been critical of youth development in Cyprus, and I think rightly so. But don't get me wrong, I don't think that the blame is down to most of the coaches. I think it's down to the lack of resources that they have. But there's another side of the coin, which we've been told about by numerous pro footballers, and we're talking about players that have played at the highest level, then have gone to Cyprus, and they said, right, a lot of these youngsters have got the talent, but they don't show the effort. They don't show the effort. They don't want to go into training early. They don't want to be the first ones in, the last ones out. They don't want to put in. Now, I don't know whether that's, again, a cultural thing. Maybe they feel, whatever. I'm just playing football. I enjoy it, but I'm doing what I can. Or maybe they think that's enough to get them to the next level.
Look, it's a tough one, because I think what was different for older generations also, because like growing up, we would go to tournaments in Greece, for example, and we would get destroyed, and we would understand then that, yeah, I'm good for Cyprus, but out there, no, I'm not good. Nowadays, it's like the Agia Napa tournament, where it's Cypriots playing against Cypriots, and Cypriots thinking, I'm the best player in the world, because as far as they know, they are. They've never faced anyone better than them, and they do get complacent. But at the end of the day, the issue is the Cypriot players are not good enough. That's the problem. Now, Cypriot players not playing, the national team being what it is, that's the symptom of the Cypriot footballer not being good enough. There's, the reality, there's no simple solution. I think in Cyprus, we often try to find one thing to fix everything, and that doesn't exist. And also, we have very short-term memory. So we try things that we did 4 years ago and failed, but then we did the complete opposite, and now we're going back to that. Like, as you said, youth development, there's issues with it. There's a lack of resources. Yes, we do have rules that don't make sense. For example, the under 22 rule, like having an unlimited number of foreign players. I think, I don't know any other country that has that. But at the end of the day, the issue is Cypriot footballer right now not good enough and not ready. Because of course there are some guys who are good enough. There's guys that are like the boy who played Apoel Othellos the other day, Katif Gis. He's incredible. Mm-hmm. But there's too few of those guys, so that's one issue. And the other issue is they are not ready at 17, 18, 16, 19. So once we admit that and we accept that, then we can start addressing all the other issues, because I think we are in denial the main problem. Yeah, if it wasn't gets Paya or this and that, but the reality is, we don't have a right back who's good enough for international level. We don't have a lot of positions, like players with levels. So once we accept that, and the players are the last to blame in this process. Once we accept that the Cypriot player is not good enough, then you can start fixing things. Because right now, I think we are focusing on the wrong areas. Like, it's not about the rules, and it's not about measuring the youth national teams, and it's not, no, the Cypriot player is not good enough, and he's not in a position to compete with foreign players. So how do we fix that? That's, for me, that's the big question.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to sidestep a little bit because you mentioned something in terms of, we don't have certain players in certain positions, like the right back situation, which I kind of agree with, in all fairness. But then when you look at the players that we do have available in certain positions and they aren't being selected, it fills me with a lot of anger. And I'll give you an example. The last game, we had Gogits and Gibriano at centre-back. Both of them are central midfielders. Okay? Fine, no problem. If that's what Ken Spar want to do, that's his prerogative. But then when you look at the lad that's at Atletico Madrid, that was in our under-21s, and he decided to choose Greece for various reasons. And I'm pretty sure that the guy that we've got in charge of the national team is one of the reasons. I'm sure there are other reasons as well. But I'm sure he's got something to do with the lad defecting to Greece. This is what frustrates me because, okay, he may not be fully ready for first-team international football, but if he's good enough to play in the Champions League for Atletico Madrid, I'm pretty sure he's good enough to at least get half an hour against Georgia. No disrespect to Georgia. 20 minutes against Scotland, 15 against Norway. It's little things like this which question. It's like the other side of the coin, as I said,
Yeah. Look, I mean, can you blame him though? And I think that's
no, I don't blame him.
It's going to happen more and more, because I think, like Okas, if he has a chance to play for Australia, why wouldn't he? Fordy play for Bulgaria. Why wouldn't he? I mean, and to be fair, like, maybe that's inevitable. Like, even if we're doing well, like, if I can play for Greece, I'm gonna choose Greece over Cyprus, and I can't blame a kid that, I mean, he was born in Greece, his parents are Greek, and so forth. Like, I think some players inevitably we're gonna lose out on, as it's a globalized world nowadays. At the same time, that's why we can't afford not to call up maybe some British Cypriots. But again, okay, we lost Kosti, fine. The issue is, if you look at who's another young center back, we don't really have anyone who has the level. I mean, that's like, okay, I may be biased because I found Andrea Evangelou to the States, but for me, like, after Kosti, it's Evangelou, who's a year younger. But if you look at 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, it's Kosti and Evangelou, the ones who have the potential to play, not for Doxa, but play for a top 6 team in Cyprus. We have two guys. 2001 is Nicolas Panayiotou. Like, when in 5 years, there's only 3 players that have the potential. Maybe they won't even make it, but there's 3 guys that have the potential to actually play, at a high level. That's, we're doing something wrong, that's just the reality of it.
Well, this is a conversation I've had with many people. And, again, I'm going to talk about Oka for a brief second because he's playing Premier League 2, which is a higher level than the Brathlima. Let's get it right. It's a higher level than a lot of the obscure leagues across Europe. And I think we can agree with that. So surely it would make sense to call him up to the national team, give him his cap at a competitive game like a qualifier. So you've cemented him as a Cypriot player.
Yeah, but I don't think it's you want to trick guys into being committed for the national team. Look, like if you want to play for Cyprus, play for Cyprus. I get where you're coming from. At the same time, I think we'll take the guys that want to be here. Okay, what I will say I don't like about that approach is just that it cheapens the national team, which we have done a lot of. For example, like Yannis Achas, he was called up to the men's national team before he played an official game for Apple. It's the national team, and you're calling up an 18-year-old with 0 professional games because he's done well in a friendly. Or Haralambos, fantastic player, but at the time of his call-up, he had played like 25 minutes in the top division the week before. Suddenly, 25 minutes is enough to get you in the national team. Or you have these call-ups like Tomas Nicolaou, Katsandonis. They train with the national team. They are barely top division players, or at least they haven't proven yet that they are even, adequate to play at the top division. Michalis Ioannou was starting for the national team at 18, and it's taken him 6 more years to get anywhere near the standard of the national team. So I think, calling players who haven't really earned it on the one side, we say we want to go with the youth and so on, but at the same time, it cheapens the national team because the national team should be the top of the top of Cypriot football. And, like if Apoel won't play you at 18, how do you get in the national team? For me as a fan of the national team, because I am a fan of the national team, that's like the team I would support. I find it, like you would never do this if you were coaching at club level. Start Michalis Ioannou at 18 years old at right back. So why are you doing that for the national team?
The thing is, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? And again, I've got no problem with nationalizing foreign players, but when you call up the likes of Roberge and more, look, I like Joel. I get on with him very well, so I've got nothing against him. But does that not cheapen it then? Because you're not using
of course it does.
You know what I mean?
No, of course. Look, of course it does, and especially, look, even Joel, probably he's the best Cypriot goalkeeper available.
Of course, 100%.
But Joel was playing for teams that got relegated. That's where he left us. So it's not like that we are even nationalizing, like Spoljaric, he was the best player of Apollon. Gogic, of course, he was the best player, striker of that decade alongside Raufman. But we are at the point where we have to nationalize guys that are playing for clubs that are getting relegated. So, of course, it cheapens it. At the same time, what's the alternative? Calling up, there's no Cypriot goalkeeper that is playing. So, and then the alternative, like we called up Haralambos, was it Kyriagidis of Omonia? He was starting for the national team and he hadn't played a single game in his life, literally. So, and again, I think
he's made his debut like 3 years ago. I think about 3 years ago. I think it was
about he played for the national team before he played for, and this isn't a new problem because Tassos Kissas, before he went to Salamina, up until he was at Apollon, there was a point in time, I remember, he had 17 appearances with the national team, and at club level, he had played 14 games, which must be a world first. But, it's, I think, focusing on individuals, focusing on the coach, it ignores the point that, there's no good Cypriot goalkeeper. That's the reality. And you might say, Fitos Mihail. And of course, Fitos is decent, but there's a reason why he's not started at club level for any club. He didn't start for Olympiacos. He didn't start for Aris. He had half a season at Salamina. I mean, like we need to produce better players than what we are producing right now, and increasing the fines or having, like mandatory, you have to start 4 players and so on. It doesn't raise the level of player. It just prolongs the career of certain guys. And it allows mediocre players to get overvalued because you need to be starting Cypriots. And the issue for me is youth development, like the players, the work that's being done, maybe due to a lack of resources, maybe to lack of resources and other reasons. We have guys that not enough good guys and not enough guys that are ready at 17, 18, 19, because I see them, like the reality is, even for the universities, like I mentioned before, there's 6 boys from our under 21 national team that went to the States. Only 2 of them are playing regularly as freshmen. Only 2 of them are starting every game as freshmen. And these are the best of the best that we have going to universities, not going to top division clubs or clubs abroad. They are going to universities, and they're extremely talented, but they're not ready yet, and that's down to the work that's being done at the academies, the system itself. There's too many clubs. It's not competitive enough for the good players. Like the best players in the under 19s league are always 16 years old. They're not 17, they're not 18. And because they start regressing, because even if you don't
They
want to,
peak
you get
early.
complacent. Yeah. Well, it's not
Yeah.
about peaking. It's at 16, you're the best player, and there's no more challenge, because at 16, the best Cypriot players are ready to go to the second division, but they don't go. They stay, and they're not going to start at 16 in the second division, but they can still, play off the bench, make an impact, train at that level every day, and be counted on. Because when you go to the first team of Apoel at 16, you're not really training. You're making up the numbers. Like if you're number 26, 27, 28 on the roster, you are not training. Training is for 22 players. So they stop developing at 16. Because at 16, the way the league is, the under 19s league is, it stops being challenging for them.
That's a very, very fair point. And look, we've gone almost an hour. My goodness, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, man, because I think we can talk all day about this, or all night, should I say? But look, just to reiterate, I mean, I've got no problem with nationalizing foreign players if they're good enough. And I've been speaking for months about getting Morgan Brown into the national team, because I think he could do a job. Personally, I think he's better than a lot of the midfielders that we've got available. But that's just my opinion, and I'm being biased here. But I agree with you that not more needs to be done. But if I asked you, where do we begin? It's almost as if you don't know where to start, really, because one hand washes the other, both wash the face. But where's it's coming from all angles, honestly.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, where we start from is admitting that Cypriot players are not good enough. Everything else is a symptom of that. When we accept that Cypriot players are not good enough, that's when we can start addressing the issues. Because I think right now, again, you look at the like Spiros Neofitidis of past, I heard him on the radio and he was saying, this is not the level of the Cypriot player. No, this is
And then
exactly the level of the
Gop
Cypriot player.
came out with a statement absolutely lambasting the guy for having an opinion.
But I mean, the reality, it is the level of the Cypriot player. Like that's why we lost 9-0 to France. That's why our men's national team has lost to Jordan, Luxembourg, Malta, and not just lost, they embarrassed us. Like, that's the level of Cypriot player. It's not a new thing, like, because again, like, if if I think like the last 15 years, like Cypriot strikers. Geros, Itas, Kagoulis, fair enough. After them, it's been 15 years. And then you go like Nestoras Mitidis, Kolokoudia, Zouloutas, you know, it's a problem. We have to admit it, like we are not producing enough players. Once we accept that, then okay, a lot of things have to change.
But Philo, when you say when we
Yeah.
need to accept it, are we talking about everyone in general? Is this just like the FAs, the clubs? Because listen, I'm going to be brutally honest here. We're almost as bad as San Marino. Okay, we're almost as bad as San Marino, and San Marino's players aren't professionals.
Exactly. But look, I mean, a lot of the Cypriot players are not professional, and I mean it in the sense of making your living out of football. I mean,
Right.
you have a lot of guys. For example, Valentinos Pastelli, who's been doing great for Zagagi. He works as a beatman. Yeah,
I heard that.
and
Yeah,
like,
I
yeah.
heard that.
So like that's where our football has gotten. Like a lot of part-time players play in our top division at the low-level clubs. So where do we start from? You have to scratch a lot of things now, and the who's we. Well, the federation needs to accept it first. The players also, because I think again we're in denial, and it doesn't suit anyone. Because in other countries, you have a separation of elite sports and grassroots level sports, and of course, you want as many kids to play, to enjoy football. It's good for socializing, health, etc., etc. But that's one part of what the FA has to do. The other part is elite development. These two can't go together, and they don't go together in any country. In Cyprus, we've mixed it up, and essentially what we have is just grassroots sports. That's all the FA does. So when at under 19s level, we've got 3 divisions. Why? Like there's barely, like in any given age group in Cyprus, you will struggle to find 25 half decent players. That's the reality. So why do we have 3 leagues with 14 teams each? Under the federation, now have it run it separately so people can stay active, people can enjoy it. But if you're talking about elite level, you need a lot less teams. You need to license academies. Of course, have academies so kids can go and enjoy and parents pay. And it's great that this industry exists. But elite level academies, have 8 of them. They play each other. They're licensed, like they have to be abroad where you have, you need to have this many coaches. You have to follow, this particular training schedule. So, for example, like in the Netherlands, in order to have an academy that's licensed up until the age of 13, they all follow the same curriculum. So it doesn't matter where you're at, that player is going to have a baseline level, a baseline understanding of football, and so on, because they all get the same training. You don't want to do it, you don't get a license, you can't operate an academy. But in order to do that, again, you have to start separating grassroots and elite level sports. And it would cost a lot of money to a lot of people because right now, academies are a huge industry, and you have this then cottage industry of personal trainers, technique coaches, and so forth. And for me, we treat football for boys. It's come to be a bit like every girl in Cyprus does ballet, but there's no expectation and there's no chance that she's from Bolshoi in Russia or be a professional. That's how we are treating football right now. It's we pay, our son goes there, he spends his afternoons, fantastic, and then you have some boys that really work, that are really talented, that have what it takes, and they are being held back because their teammates are all these guys that are just paying to be there,
It's like when my dad used to give me £5 or 5 lires worth of 20 cents to go to the Sferisterio. Hadi binne manamu, binne beksiz, Jegani, to get it out of your system.
But that's what it is, and in England, if you're in an academy, it's like 100% I'm going to be a pro footballer. That's the mindset. Whereas in Cyprus, you have kids in the under 19s of the big clubs that couldn't care less, And yeah, you shouldn't be in the academy of Omonia, Ifabuel, or Vanorthosi if you don't live and breathe football 24/7,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Phile, I'll tell you what, this has been a fantastic discussion, and I really hope we can continue this another time because I'm sure you got a lot more to say. I've got a lot more questions to ask anyway. But before we wrap it up, where can we find, or the viewers find, your website, all the other socials, everything to get in touch with you? Or maybe there might be some parents or some students, I guess, that want to do scholarships in the United States and go through you.
Yeah, of course. So it's JSAscholarships.com. And Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's at JSA Scholarships.
Lovely. And all of that is going to be put in the description. I hope we could do this again, honestly, because I want to get more people on as well, because I've got friends that are academy coaches in the UK, Cypriots, that I'm sure will have loads of questions to ask you, and I'm pretty sure you might want to discuss certain things with them. So I think this is a good bit of groundwork for what we can do in the future. But you're constantly going back and forth from the United States, so we'll do it at a time that suits you, clearly.
Of course.
It'll be very difficult. Well, that's it from us, boys and girls. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back very, very soon. Give us a follow on Twitter at This Is Mappa. We're also on Instagram at This Is Mappa Standard. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will be back. We will be back. I can't even get the words out of my mouth, and I live in the UK. We'll be back very soon. Hade, goodbye.